Hey, Peter.
Okay. Hi, Brenden.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. Cool.
And
All
we're
right.
recording.
Are we recording?
Yeah, it says it's working.
Okay. Great. Great, man. Well, so let's see. How should we start? You want to start by you want to ask me something and then I'll ask you something?
Sure, sounds good.
All right.
Well, I would like to start by saying it's an honor to even talk to you about my film, Iran Hot Tea Cold Conversations, and that's kind of why I'm even here, I guess. And unfortunately, it's these unfortunate current events that Iran is still in the spotlight because of, you know, the global effort to, change the politics there by whatever
Mhm.
means.
Right.
Um, it's just cool to be here with you, and I just wanted to express my gratitude and honor to kind of like represent because there's not a big voice for the Iranian people right now, out there.
Right. Right.
And I
Right.
don't
Right.
really.
Well, I'm honored too. You're the movie director, and I'm getting to talk to you.
Oh yeah.
So I love Iran for hot tea, cool conversations, as you know. And so let's just say the reason we're talking about it now is, well, when did you make the movie?
I made it in 2006 is when I started it,
Okay.
and it was amazing because it was through our mutual connection to New College. I went to New College so that I could go to Iran with Jerry Decker
That's
and that
beautiful.
program, and
God
then it
rest
became my.
Jerry's soul.
Yeah, yeah, and I know he always would say, I wanted to repeat what he always told me is that America has so much to learn from Iran, and that's what no one thinks about. Whenever I say I went to Iran, they always go, "Oh my God, it's so scary. How was it?" And Jerry would always be like, "Americans don't realize that we have so much to learn from Iran, you know." And I'm sure he
Well, I
would say
guess
that.
one of the reasons you and I are talking is why America can't realize that. And so maybe I'll just say that the occasion for our talking today is another assassination last week of a physicist in Iran, um, and sort of a horrifying murder on the streets of Iran
Mhm.
of this physicist, which harkens back to a year ago when Donald Trump ordered the killing of Soleimani, the general, the
Mhm.
Iranian general,
Yeah.
and it's reported in this country. After all, when somebody's murdered in cold blood, you might say,
Mm. Mhm.
on the street, which happened in the case of both of these Iranians, the first reaction should be some kind of awe, or
Right.
a
Step
reaction
back.
from the sacred place that someone has lost his life, in this
Mhm.
case, him. And that's not the American reaction. The American reaction is to leap right away into whether this was a strategically good or bad move in the war against our enemy, Iran.
Yeah.
And so it's immediately plugged into a mental film or narrative in which Iran is already the evil other, and we are engaged in some kind of battle with them. Okay,
Mhm.
that's the inner the inner script that is already playing in the culture.
Mhm.
And the question is, maybe if I can speak first, because it's a way of
Yeah.
introducing your film. Why is that? What is that? And as I
Mm.
show in my book, The Desire for Mutual Recognition, Social Movements and the Dissolution of the False Self. That's the title of the book that you and I have been working on.
Mhm.
And I mean, that it's published,
You
but
wrote the book. Yeah.
you're filming it.
Yeah.
You're filming me talking about it. And as I show in the book, the the vulnerable human that we all are, that we're all born into, seeking recognition from each other in our full humanity, has long since been withdrawn into ourselves, and we are wrapped up in a picture in which our true longing for connection to the other, to see and be seen by the other, we have replaced that longing out of fear of the other with an image of the self and an image of we as an aspect of the outer self that is repeatedly imagined and then inflated in order to feel connected to others without really being connected to others. So in the case of Iran, for example, instead of experiencing the humanity of the Iranian people, each person and all people, instead of experiencing that, we immediately experience a narrative in which I am part of a we called America, and we are great and in danger, and we are under attack. And in order to keep puffing up that false self, that false we have to keep finding demons who we can say are them who are out to get us.
Mm-hmm.
Underneath that is a fear of our own vulnerability that we learned when we entered this still alienated world. A fear, underneath that is a fear that all this will come tumbling down and we'll realize we just want to love one another. But that's masked and protected by this false self in which we imagine we are identified with each other and we are connected. United States, we, America, are connected in this great Make America Great Again self that is under attack from, who shall we say? The Chinese? Or should we say the Russians today? Should we say Iran today?
Right.
Shall we say Venezuela today? Shall we say Castro today? Shall we say a rotating demon who is at different times, in some ways, more or less arbitrarily latched onto, turned into a demon in a way that can keep inflating our own imaginary self. Which, if you go deep enough into it, you realize the imaginary self is a defense mechanism against the vulnerable, real being who just longs to actually be with one another in a loving, embracing way. But that self is culturally buried, that self, underneath this narrative. So just say that by way of introduction, because you and I have been working on the general theme of this book and these ideas. Then we had, with Iran, people may no longer remember this, but last March, Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, who's a big tough guy, you'd never know that he was a vulnerable human being longing for love and connection, because he's too busy being ready to kick the shit out of everybody.
Yeah, he's the bully in the cafeteria. I mean, it's high school bullying stuff.
So he imposed sanctions on Iran just as the coronavirus was sweeping Iran, causing manifold death. And the immorality of imposing sanctions on a people that is scrambling for the most basic medicines under the same virus that the entire world is being subjected to, it was amazing. And that's why we're going to attach to this recording that article I wrote called Demonizing Iran During the Coronavirus, or something like that.
Well, I'm glad you said that.
So anyway, Brenden, what I want to say to you is what I love about your movie and the impulse behind your movie was you tried to penetrate all that, just by yourself. So maybe you should talk about what happened that led you to make the film.
Yeah, thank you. And I love what you say, because I mean, you've always been an inspiration in my life as an intellectual person, and even challenging the idea of the SATs back when I was in high school and stuff was inspirational to me. And in the notion of like you know, the desire for mutual recognition and kind of putting that to the test through travel and
Mhm.
through going to another place that they were at the time. It's funny, it was really heavy that they were the axis of evil, and I mean, I guess it still carries over. They don't use that language as much anymore, but yeah, I mean, I kind of went over there as a experiment to say, well, um, I, I do trust that most people in the world are good and have this notion. You know, it's a simple idea, but that humans are all after the same thing, which is like a
Mhm.
better life for their children and or their nieces and nephews. You know what I mean? And then on that ground, we can always find common ground with everyone. And it's true. And my trip to Iran proved that
What
basically.
did you do before you? I know you. It says it in the movie, but you just grabbed your camera, right?
Yeah, it was very it was inspired by a Bob Dylan film called Don't Look Back kind of, but just that verite style of just let the camera rip. Everyone loves it nowadays because we're all verite these days. But yeah, I mean it was exciting because it does work to capture a magic where you realize, okay, Brenden has not scripted this, and you know you can tell that by the kind of the quality in a way, but also the authenticity of just me and a camera, man and a camera. It's fun, and it translates in the film. So, and it's neat that somehow I've been more critical of it than the message does reach people when they watch it, which is nice. And that is that Iran
Talk
is,
about the message. What did you see when you went there, and what are we going to watch when we watch the film?
yeah. I mean, the best part of the film to me was the unscripted moments where I got to sit down with different people in all walks of life from Iran, and they kind of surprised me, one with their knowledge of America, and this is back in 2006, so the connection has even grown more. But you know, just with their connection with pop culture, but also just how much they're interested in the West, especially the youth of Iran. Um, and then the overall hospitality, and there's the Islamic aspect of Iran, but then there's also a deep culture that is much older than Islam in Iran, and that's super interesting. But also just the human relationships, and I mean the love of music. Even though there's a moment when I was like filming guys play the guitar in the
Yeah.
public, and that was my favorite. And they were like, and we were told that was illegal, and it was like they're breaking the law. But it was kind of like you hear what Iran is, but then you go there and you see, oh well, they don't give a shit about that law, you know, and they're out there playing the guitar, you know. and
Well,
and I think, you know, that was kind of a cool connection, like that's America vibe, you know, like what we're jamming, you know.
yeah.
Anyways,
Oh, I
love
was just
this.
going to say it is important to so to although I was describing in the case of Pompeo and in the case of our way of demonizing Iran, the other, and making them the enemy as a way of puffing ourselves up in an imaginary way. It's also important to link that, which is the fundamental alienation in the situation, with the history
Mm,
of our relationship with Iran, because if we just start in the 1950s,
mm,
when our government and the CIA overthrew the democratically elected
yeah, Mossadegh.
Mossadegh
Yeah,
government. Nobody knows this history. See, so
that's
and
right.
we installed the Shah of Iran
Yeah.
as the ruler, the Western sympathetic ruler of Iran for our own purposes in relationship to the Suez Canal and the
Absolutely.
oil-rich region, and just general thinking we run the world,
That's right.
and so it stimulated this intergenerational rage toward the United States,
Hmm.
which in part was expressed through the authenticity of the Islamic culture, heritage, and religion, which
Mm,
is oppositional to
yeah,
secular colonialism, which our
absolutely.
country embodies. So what
Yeah.
happens eventually is the Iranian Revolution in 1979, and this crazy thing of seizing the American hostages that occurred in 1979. I don't know if your viewers don't know the story. There's a whole movie about it that won an Oscar. I've just forgotten the
Mm.
name of it now. Begins with an A.
With Ben Affleck. Yeah.
Yeah, Ben Affleck's movie. But it was, yeah. I mean, that was
He's
bizarre that
serious. Yeah.
they took those hostages for a long period of time, helped Reagan defeat Jimmy Carter in this
Right.
country, and then of course Reagan's overall orientation and Trump's also has been to make it less likely that the Western or pro-Western youth, the people who want to play guitar with us that you were describing, they are driven more into the margins the more that we have a warlike atmosphere.
Absolutely.
That gives more power to the mullahs, more power to the traditional Islamic religion, just as in this country, the traditional right wing gains
Absolutely.
power whenever we are under attack. So it's like, what I think is great about your movie is that the whole point is to break through this glossy mental pictures that are inhabiting our heads and seducing us into becoming part of the alienated us them narratives of the world, and instead you just say, okay, I'm taking my camera, citizen diplomacy, I'm going over there, I'm going to meet Mr. and Mrs. Iranian, and
That's right.
what's so
That's
cool
right.
about the movie. It's just completely demystifying of the whole preposterous
Right.
baloney about the evil Iran and why it's okay to murder their citizens on the street. I mean,
Right.
what? And then, I'm sorry to keep talking, but there's this guy,
No,
Tom
it's
Friedman,
beautiful.
who wrote this terrible column this week in the New York Times about Iran, in which he describes Iran as homicidal in the column. After that's his response to our committing homicide. Not
No,
us.
totally.
This was probably Israel, but it was
Condoned by.
Pompeo and Netanyahu were together right before the
Absolutely.
place, and it's highly likely that they were in some conversation with each other about it. But
Absolutely.
so gee, I mean, I think you did a great
Well,
service by
I
just
appreciate. Can I jump in with
yes.
the one thing that I was very conscious of when I went over there was what you're talking about is the demonization and the way the media works in that way. And I think that the foggy picture people have in Iran is not from their travels, and it's not from anything but news, for the most part. And it is, it's amazing to consider just how it's always pushed as being left-wing media and everything, but there is an aspect where there's like a sort of militarization to the media, where it's definitely, and it's amazing that the film works because they never really show Iran in any other context other than terrorism, pretty much, and other than, they'll have the images of Iran with in the context, they're creating the context, and it's over the course of many years. And the fact that my film is like, there's a few other, like Rick Steves went to Iran, and his film does a great job too, because it is amazing that if you just show Iranians, it's hard. You go, oh, well, wait a second. Those smiles. Once you see the smiles, and
Yeah.
you know that it's just like any other place, and
Right.
there's uniqueness. But so the film was definitely to try to counteract that the false images that we're getting from the skewed news that we get. And it is amazing that that's why everyone reacts to me the same whenever I tell them, when I went to Iran. Wow, you went, wow, was that, how'd you do? It was so dangerous, and meanwhile there's just buses of Germans traveling to Iran like it's, wherever else, and
Well,
it's interesting.
I can imagine some people watching this might say, well, wait a minute now, there is real
Sure.
stuff going
Yeah.
on in the Middle East, and what about Israel, and what about, anyway,
Well, yeah.
Israel
Yeah,
is
and
in
it's
the middle
always.
of this false we thing that I was talking about before too. But the main thing is make peace. That's the
Yes,
main thing.
absolutely.
Be a citizen diplomat, relate to the Iranian people as fully human, just as we
That's
are,
right. That's
beautiful in
right.
their own right, and take action that makes peace. That everybody should approach it that way. I think the Iranians would be receptive to that. They always have been.
Oh yes.
Look at the current Prime Minister Rouhani. I mean, he has been unbelievably reasonable in
Oh yeah.
relationship to the U.S. through all these murders and uh, threats. And of course, he knows the history that I was describing. Americans don't know anything about the fact that we overthrew their government
Well,
in
that's
order
the
to
scariest part.
install the
That's
Shah.
the
And
that's the
they don't
scary.
know the origins of these conflicts. So, I'm not saying Khomeini was a great guy. He's the one that called the U.S. the Great Satan and
Right. Right.
leader of the Iranian Revolution. I know the mullahs are a problem and that there's many problems in that country, but
Sure.
but the orientation that now I'm talking about real human beings forming a
Mm,
real we, you,
mm,
me, Lisa in the other room, is to make peace. Just approach these relationships as human.
yeah.
Even the Iran deal, which I certainly hope we get back into as soon as Biden
Absolutely.
becomes president, even the Iran deal is based on the idea that this is this highly dangerous foe that
Right.
we can manage to keep trapped in this deal as a way, you know, of relating to them. And I just think all that has to go. The whole
Oh,
orientation of the world has to be toward recognizing the humanity of the other
yes.
and approaching things from that spirit, right?
Well, I couldn't agree more, and I do feel like if we to imagine ourselves like a person, the country as a person, I mean, we need to relax and like we're just on a war path, and
Right,
we see red. I mean, we got hit in 9/11, and we went over there, and we haven't come back, and we're
right,
still swinging. So
right.
it's like we got to. We're the problem. I mean, I just want to say that if we could take a deep breath and look at the world with more compassion, that it would be better. That's in my heart.
Beautiful, great. Van Morrison said, if my heart could do my thinking and my head begin to feel, I could look upon the world anew and know what's really real.
Mm.
Okay. All right,
Chills.
Brenden.
Love
So
it, Peter.
watch
Thank you.
Hot Tea, Cool Conversations, everybody. It's a beautiful way of re-experiencing Iran as it really is.
Yeah,
Okay.
please do. Take
Okay,
care.
and you're going to put my article about Iran up also.
We'll
Deep
link it all
Nuts in Iran.
together. Yeah, and if you really want to get deep, read Peter's book. He's got all the
Okay,
answers in there.
okay.
Take
Take care,
care.
everybody. Bye.